Since the last time I made a Ticket to Ride video, I've graduated college, started working a full-time job, started getting back into shape, went back to therapy to fight these demons, found love, found God, and even survived a few rounds of rails and sails. But I'm back. I'm back to talk about this godforsaken game, so you know, I can't back out now. I'm too far in. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of C-Tab. Today we're going to be talking about Ticket to Ride Germany and Ticket to Ride... The fuck is this fly on, dude? This guy's immortal. Today we're going to be talking about both Ticket to Ride Germany and Ticket to Ride Märklin, as they share the same exact board. So I think it's just easier to knock out two birds with one stone. And you know what? No messing around. No bullshit. Let's just go. Märklin is a limited edition game that came out in 2006, and it goes for quite the selling price online now, but I'm lucky enough to have owned a copy before making this video. Thank God, honestly, because I have to pay off these loans. I cannot afford a $160 copy of Ticket to Ride right now, okay? Days of Wonder and Märklin Trains actually had some sort of deal for this game. Märklin is apparently a pretty big deal in the miniature trains world, creating high quality train models. Märklin depicts a different model train on every single train card. And no, I don't mean every color, I mean every single card. Märklin also comes with a DVD that introduces players to Märklin model trains, but that DVD either didn't come with my print or has just simply been lost to time. Now, the fact that there are two different versions of this game might seem a little weird at first, but what if I told you there was actually three? Zug Deutschland is another somewhat limited edition game, but not in the same vein as Märklin. Deutschland came out in 2012, 5 years prior to Germany's release. The game was only available to German and Austrian markets, which means it's one of the few ticket games that I don't have a copy of. From my understanding, this game had the same route cards as Märklin, but there were no passengers and no locomotive +4 cards. I'll get into the specifics of what this means later, but the TLDR is that Deutschland removed two of the core mechanics of Märklin, but Germany has these mechanics, so you could be a little confused as to like, where in that translation do those mechanics come back in? And of course that was added in the Zug Deutschland 1902 expansion pack, exclusive to German and Austrian markets, which added in more tickets and the passenger mechanic. I can't believe you're even asking, it was very obvious. So to review, Ticket to Ride Märklin is a limited edition Ticket to Ride game that takes place in Germany that came out in 2006. Zug Deutschland is a limited market game that came out in 2012 with an expansion coming out for it in 2015. Finally, Ticket to Ride Germany came out globally in 2017, combining Zug Deutschland and its expansion 1902. It's a bit convoluted, but basically, this game has been remade and repackaged twice. Historically, I've said that Märklin is my favorite Ticket to Ride game, but over the years, that feeling has dwindled a bit. The main reason I enjoyed this game so much had to do with the passenger mechanic. I just thought the passengers were such a good addition to the game, and I still do. However, I kind of started feeling like the game had an over-reliance on long routes. The long routes felt really strong, so I went into this review trying to see if the short routes were actually useless or not, and if the long routes were so good that it overshadowed my enjoyment of the passenger mechanic. And let me tell you, this review took an emotional toll on me, okay? I have never put this much thought or rewrote a script, okay, as many times as I've rewritten this thing, okay? And for what? Literally for Ticket to Ride. I need to go outside. Dude. Alright, it's another section of Ticket to Ride mechanics, so you know the deal by now. We're gonna do a quick speed round to just go over some of the mechanics that didn't quite make it into this game. Starting off with tunnels. Yeah, tunnels are not in this game, and I wouldn't say that's a huge loss here. I'm not a huge tunnel stan, but I'm also not a tunnel hater, so it doesn't really make a huge difference to me. I also feel like tunnels have to be implemented well into the board, and I'm not sure they would really fit here, so I think it's fine that they're not in here. Ferries are also not in this game, which is a bit of a shame. I wouldn't say any mechanic not being present in a ticket game is a total loss, but I feel this is the easiest one to just kind of of slide in. They make locomotives a higher priority, which I really like, but overall it doesn't really affect the game too much, so I can't complain. And last but not least, the 2-player mechanic from Team Asia is not included in this game. This may come as a surprise, but you do not play in teams in this version of Ticket. I'm raffle-coptering right now. I am so funny. These games also use the most routes completed bonus card instead of the longest route bonus card. I like the idea of this since it should, in theory, give short route players a leg up on long route players. In actuality, though, it doesn't always work out like that. Not that it should necessarily, but it's still not uncommon for a long route player to complete close to or even more routes than a short route player, which is prevalent in this game especially. More on that later. The 2 new mechanics in this game are the separation of long and short routes and passengers. I'm going to be going into a more in-depth analysis of how I think this makes the game play later, but for now I'm just going to cover how they work mechanically. Also, the passenger mechanic works differently in Märklin and Germany, so I'm gonna have to cover how they work in both games, but we'll get it done, it's okay. In Germany and Märklin, routes are placed into 2 different piles instead of just one pile being short routes and 1 pile being long routes. At the start of the game, each player takes 4 routes of any combination from those piles. So for example, a player can take 2 of each route card, or they can take 3 of one and 1 of the other, or they can just take 4 of one. During the game, players also get to take any combination of 4 cards, having to just keep 1 of them. Now let's start talking about where each game differs, which is mostly in its passenger mechanic, but Märklin does have a few things that kind of spice it up. It's got some quirky shit in there. Let's start with Märklin, since this one has a bit more weight to it. At the start of the game, players put tokens differing in colors into piles, stacking them from the lowest number of that color to the highest. White piles consist of only 1 token, a numbered 2 token. Yellow piles range from 1 to 3, red piles range from 2 to 4, and the black pile ranges from 4 to 7. These stacks will be placed on each city of the map, depending on what color that city is. Berlin, for example, is the only black city, giving it the black token pile. During the game, whenever a player places trains to take a route, they may place a passenger in one of the 2 cities they just connected. As a turn, a player may run their passenger through their route, picking up each token in that route, not including where the passenger started. After the player is done, they add all of the tokens to their score, and that passenger is removed from the game. Overall, this is one of my, if not my favorite ticket mechanic, solely because it also has a mechanic, you know, part of the spice that I was talking about earlier, part of the quirkiness of the game, that really lets you screw with your opponents. In addition to train cards, 2 new cards have been added to the train deck, the passenger ticket and the locomotive 4+ cards. I'll get to the locomotive 4+ in a bit, but let's start with the passenger ticket. The passenger ticket allows your passenger to use one of another player's routes while moving your passenger. If you have multiple passenger tickets, you can hop multiple routes. This mechanic is one of the only ticket mechanics that allows you to directly mess with another player, which automatically makes it one of my favorites. Sometimes ticket can kind of feel like you're playing alone, just trying to avoid being blocked by other players, or you're doing the blocking, so you are very much aware of other players. In this game though, you are very much reminded that everyone is trying to achieve the same goal, and you most likely will get screwed over. This mechanic adds a lot of layers to decision making as well. Now not only do you have to worry about being blocked, but just being in the same city as another player can be dangerous. It is really scary connecting to a city where the other player in that city is sitting on like 5 passenger tickets. You've just opened yourself up to getting a lot of points stolen. The last addition to Märklin is the locomotive 4+ card. This card can be taken as a regular card, so you can still pick up another card when you choose this card from the pool of train cards. I just said card like 5 times in a row, holy shit. It functions as a locomotive, but only for routes of length 4 or more. Passenger tickets help out short route players, while the locomotive 4+ cards help out long route players. So I guess both strategies get something in the end. Generally speaking though, long routes have always been a more efficient strategy, so getting a random locomotive is pretty strong. To be honest, I don't really think this was needed as an inclusion, as you can literally just players choose to take long routes in this game, which is a buff in itself. Overall, Märklin's passenger mechanic is so good that it makes most ticket mechanics look pretty dull by comparison. Being able to interact with players in a new way adds a very interesting dynamic to the game that a lot of the other ticket games I think lack. Short route players can actually do like a 30-point move now, which is really satisfying. A common complaint you'll find about this game is that its setup is super annoying. Putting all of these chips into stacks and then placing them on the board is a bit more setup than most ticket games, and picking the chips up without causing civilians to get absolutely obliterated can be quite the struggle as well. For me, this is not a deal breaker at all. It's barely even an issue. I think everyone's just being a little lazy. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes to set up, which sure might be a little bit more, but if one player shuffles the cards and one player sets this up, it really shouldn't take you that long. Stop complaining. You're all just being lazy. All right, so that's about it for the mechanics for Märklin. Let's talk about Germany now. Ticket to Ride Germany takes the deep and complex passenger system of Märklin and dumbs it down a little bit, but it still works pretty well actually, and for what it's trying to accomplish, it might even do it better than Märklin. In Germany, instead of each player starting with 3 passengers, 50 passengers are separated across the board on the cities randomly. There are 5 different colors and 10 passengers of each color. The rulebook tells you how many random passengers to put on each city, which admittedly is a bit of a chore. This easily could have been put on the board and not in the rulebook. I don't understand how no one thought of this. I actually find this setup a bit more annoying since I constantly have to look back and forth between the rulebook and the board to see where the passengers are placed. At least in Märklin, every city clearly shows what point values are given to it. Even in this example recording, I missed a city, which took me 5 minutes to find. It's Ulm, by the way. I forgot Ulm. During the game, whenever a player takes a route, they take 1 passenger from each city they just connected. At the end of the game, players go through each color. The player with the most of a color gets 20 bonus points, and the player with the second most gets 10 bonus points. If players tie for a position, they both get the points. I find this way of collecting passengers a bit drier than Märklin's, but by no means is it a bad ticket mechanic. It still adds in some depth, and it also really does buff short routes, which is something that Ticket always seems to need. Although in 3-player games, this mechanic is not all that great. There are only so many ways to break down 10. 5 and 5, 4, 4 and 2, 3, 3 and 4. You're gonna end up tying other players a lot in numbers of meeples, and that feels pretty bad. At the same time though, if you pop off with meeples, you can get a ton of points, so it's a bit inconsistent in terms of value. To be completely fair though, this mechanic is basically copied in Pennsylvania and just done so much better there. So by comparison, this looks pretty bad. Overall, the passenger mechanic in both of these games are super cool. Even though I think Märklin's version of passengers is more fun, Germany's is a bit more realistic in how it actually helps short route players. I would say that passengers are probably in my top 3 added ticket mechanics, with the other 2 being the stations from Old West and loops from India. So now that you know how the game works, how do I feel about the game? Let's get into it. That's how I transition every single one. Jesus. So this might be a bit abrupt, but you might be wondering where I've been since I only upload once or twice a year. But I swear this is gonna come back to Ticket to Ride. Okay, just hang in there. I'm now kind of known on the internet as the Ticket to Ride guy, which is funny because at this point I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the game. I love playing Ticket with my family, and I love analyzing the game. I love talking about the game, but honestly on game night there are a lot of other games I'd probably play over Ticket. Something with more player interaction like Cosmic or Small World kind of speaks to me more. Also go check out my Cosmic Encounter video. When I originally wrote this script, this entire section was supposed to be dedicated to how the short routes in this game are complete dog shit, and how the long route strategy is clearly better, as it almost always is in Ticket. Pondering the question, why separate the 2 decks in the first place? I've done a ton of research for this video, and most of it supported my theory, but when I went online to see if other people had the same experiences, I was met with mixed results. Some people seemed to have the same experience as me, saying that the long routes were absolutely dominant in this game. But then there was a few people who said that short routes were actually better, which really confused me. But then I saw this comment.
This strategy gets brought up on literally every TTR forum in existence. There's a good reason for it. It works really well when everyone is noobs. At a low level, players are only worried about themselves. This allows a player to use a long-term strategy like this effectively. I used to do this all the time. Then I informed my opponents that if they ever wanted to beat me, they needed to be more cutthroat. That doesn't just mean blocking. It also means intentionally depleting their train piles. There's no way in hell you can complete 6 long routes if players are aggressively diminishing their train supplies, so you'll be left with incomplete long routes that will probably lose you the game.
For some reason, I just lost all confidence in what I was saying. I didn't want to make a long video going on a rant about how bad the short routes were, when honestly, I kind of had a gut feeling that I had missed something or that I was wrong. I've put hours into making ticket analysis videos, trying to be as analytical as possible, without even stopping to analyze my feelings while playing the game. I guess what I'm trying to say is at a certain point, it became more important for me to be right about my analysis of the game, instead of whether or not I actually like playing the game. Because there is a difference there. Even if the game is unbalanced, do I like the design decisions made? Does it feel better to play? Even with the issues I had with the game, I still think I'd play this over America any day, because I like the game more. So in short, this really stressed me out, so instead of continuing to stress myself out, I worked on a Cosmic Encounter video for 4 months. In that time, I played a ton of Ticket Online, and to be honest, it was a bit of a hellscape. The Ticket client is, it's pretty bad. I could honestly probably make an entire video on how bad the Ticket client is. But playing America 1910 over and over was honestly a bit grating, but playing it over and over made me realize that I did actually have a lot to learn about Ticket to Ride. Ticket is an absolutely brutal game that I used to think just came down to short routes versus long routes. What I failed to realize is that Ticket to Ride is a game about routes. Vancouver to Montreal, LA to New York, LA to Miami, Seattle to New York, I don't know, just eat up the East Coast and fuck over everyone else, or be the lowest of the low and just eat up the center of the board and take whoever tries to pass you down with you. Ticket's America map really exaggerates the highs and lows of Ticket because it has no other mechanics to buffer the utter brutality that the core mechanics of this game really encourage. I actually am shocked people like this map because it is so goddamn brutal. Going last in America is actually so bad. I cannot believe people don't talk about this. The main constant of the game is that you're going to be playing one of a few key routes. I mean, really, play a game of America 1910 with 4 players and tell me the game doesn't essentially boil down to whoever can draw and complete 2 of the 3 major cross-country routes. Like, genuinely 3 people have completed that route card, but only 1 person draws into it. So like I always say, it's a skill issue. This isn't to say that luck in this game is inherently bad. That's not what I'm saying. Obviously there's luck involved in this game, and that's just part of the game that you kind of have to accept. What I am saying though is having many games determined by this starts to feel a bit grating over time. Now, obviously, there are other strategies like burning your trains and just creating a very long, obnoxious route that players cannot complete the routes. But I think most people would say that that's not exactly the most fun way of approaching the game, and I would say most Ticket players wouldn't enjoy that in their game. By the way, I do that. If I get handed bad cards, it is time to create the most horrendously long route of all time, just by the way. To bring this back to Germany and Märklin, when I started making this video, I didn't really see the game like that. I just saw that long routes were generally winning the game all the time, so I just assumed that short routes were bad. So I went into this review with a short route strategy. I just wanted to prove that it could be done, that if you only played short routes, you could still win. So I did this a lot of times, and I couldn't do it. So that's when I took my break. And I'm glad I did, because I think this ticket is actually super sick. While I still think long routes are better in this game, I actually realized this kind of plays to the game's advantage. Let me explain. Previously, I was bothered by how the long routes clearly have more value than the short routes. Quite frankly, I was bothered because the long routes are actually a safer pick than the short routes. Almost every long route starts and ends right next to each other. In this spreadsheet, I have a map of this game. This is the same way I broke down the cities in India from my last video, so if you want a more in-depth explanation, you should definitely go check that out. But the TLDR of this spreadsheet is that it names each city and shows the least number of trains to get from city to city. The zeros in this spreadsheet are when a city meets itself in the matrix. And by matrix, I mean this graph. I put the cities in this spreadsheet from top down, so essentially the further right or further down you go in the spreadsheet, further down you go on the board. As you can see, all the routes start from one extreme of the board and go to the other for the long routes, which by definition it basically has to. The short routes on the other hand are much more inconsistent. Obviously it's impossible for them to go from one extreme of the board to the other, but them being able to be anywhere on the map makes them much more risky of a pull. I found this pretty counterintuitive because I believed most of the short routes should be on the west side of the map. If most of the long routes go north and south and not east and west, which aids heavily in the long route strategy, then most of the short routes should also follow this rule by being placed on the west side of the board. The west side of the board has the most cities, so players will be able to pick up the most points in passengers on that side, regardless of the version they're playing. I played this game over and over trying to play the west side and only using short tickets. Admittedly, I actually got within one action of winning the game several times. By that I mean if I had been able to get one more meeple or get one more card to place a large route, I would have won. But in my case, every single one of those 50-50s went in the opposite direction. A shame, but it's ultimately a part of the game. After coming back to this game though, I kind of realized that every ticket game comes down to creating a long ass route throughout the board and hoping that you pull cities within them. The main difference between most core ticket games and Märklin and Germany is that Märklin and Germany are just honest about the long route strategy. America's biggest issue is that not pulling a long route near the start of the game spells certain doom. Even in Mega 1910, I've seen plenty of games where the East Coast player doesn't even get the most routes completed because you can simply complete more routes by doing one large route. Europe fixed this by giving everyone a long route at the start of the game, and this game just gives players the opportunity to always draw them. Yeah, long routes are overall still better in this game, but at least everyone has access to them. This map basically sets you up to go from point A to point B. The actual content of the game, though, happens in the middle of those 2 points. Will you sacrifice passengers for large points and routes using the east side of the board? This strategy is especially deadly in Märklin, where the locomotive +4 card exists. Will you go down the middle of the board and try to create a web that can connect even the shittiest routes in the game? Or will you go down the west side of the board, picking up short routes and a ton of points and meeples, while trying your absolute hardest to make sure that you have enough points in train routes to keep up with the exclusively long route players? All of these choices start and end in basically the same exact place. Their playstyles are vastly different. I'll easily take this over getting a lockdown of Nashville turn 1 in every game of America, Jesus Christ. In the end, I really did wonder why the hell I was only going for short routes in the first place. The game gives you 4 opportunities every time you draw to not do that, but I did it. Honestly, I actually do think it's possible to win this game using only short routes. I came within a few points of doing it several times, but ultimately, if I just pulled one long route and combined it with all of my short routes, I probably would have won a few of these games pretty easily. Combined with the meeples as well, Germany and Märklin really allows players to play an aggressive, short route style that not many other tickets can replicate. On the surface level, it seems that the long routes have way more value than short routes, and I mean, in terms of raw value, of course they do, but the game does give short route players enough resources to stay competitive and maybe even scratch out a win, which is much more than most tickets can really say. Since I've basically been thinking about this game for more or less a year, I just wanted to throw some bonus things in at the end of this video because I still have a lot of things to say about it. They don't really fit into a specific category, so this is kind of like the bonus round. I'm gonna separate each of these with probably the most like vile meme ever and just throw some text on top of it. So let's get started.
Did you not ask if she believed in God? She's not a Christian!
Märklin has way less routes than Germany, and that's an issue. That's basically it. In terms of routes, Germany is just much better. Luckily though, these two games have the same exact board, so if you really wanted to, you could just use Germany's route cards in Märklin. Having less route cards in Märklin makes the short route strat harder, which is a huge minus for me. Märklin also has 2 exclusive routes that Germany doesn't, which is kind of weird. It has Denmark to Regensburg for 20 points. For short routes, it's Köln to Stuttgart for 6 points. Why these are not in Germany, I cannot tell you. I have no idea. There are also a few point differences between routes in the two games. For example, Austria to Frankfurt is worth 10 points in Germany, but is worth only 11 in Märklin. Kiel to Switzerland is worth 21 points in Märklin, but 20 in Germany. There are actually 2 more routes that follow this pattern, so I'll just place them on screen now. I'm assuming these nerfs are coming from the fact that Germany has an increased number of route cards, so the extra few points for completing these routes are a bit unnecessary. Remember, the point value of a route card is supposed to be how many trains are required to complete that route at a minimum. Emden to Austria can be done in 19 trains, so in Märklin you're picking up extra points for completing that route, which honestly isn't even necessary. Overall, I think these are good changes. The last oddity is that Germany has an exclusive route of Kiel to Stuttgart, which can be done in 16 trains, but the route card is worth 17 points. I think this is just a slip up from the designer, as Alan most likely just didn't see this cheeky side route on the west side of the map you could do, which cuts off the usage of 1 extra train.
He be dressing.
He be dressing. You be.
This is a subject that I feel kind of dumb for actually not including in some of my previous videos, but after going back to my Europe video, I realized it was like actually so cool. I don't know why I stopped doing it, so I'm back to talk about the visual design of this game. I think Germany is a bit more visually enticing than Märklin. A lot of the earlier ticket maps seem to be subdued in color, and since Märklin, I think, was the 3rd one to come out chronologically, it also follows this pattern. Although this actually helps the routes on the board stick out, it makes the board feel like less of a country that you're building trains on, and more like a bunch of points that are just being connected. I don't love the look of the board, but I will say that the background being so monotone does help with tracking where you're going to place all the passenger chips, since each point is much more distinct on the map. It's not my favorite looking game, but you could argue this game specifically is better for it. Germany, on the other hand, has some drip, brightening the board up using a lighter yellowish brown. Additionally, each of the countries has an image of a famous location from that country. Having these landmarks helps players identify each country, which I think is a nice touch. Additionally, the score tracker is like this turquoise color that I think looks really nice wrapped around the board. Overall, having this board on the table looks much more visually appealing than Märklin. Lastly, the route cards and train cards in both of these games are really pretty, especially Märklin. Like I stated in the intro, every single train card in this game depicts a different train, which I think is really cool. It's a weird thing to say, but Märklin easily has the most impressive train cards of any ticket game, so there are some brownie points there. I don't think there's too much else to say about the visual design of the game. I mean, there definitely is, but I think those are the main points.
2 guys just walked up to me and called me cringe.
Like I said, I've done a ton of research for this video, and I've really scoured these Board Game Geek pages, and I found some banger content, so I'm here to share it with some of you. The first one has the incredible title of Owned by the Wife and Ticket to Ride.
At the crucial moment in the game, I took tickets instead of setting off the final turn. I had none of the complete and could get none of them easily. So I kept a -7 while my wife took tickets and kept 2. Now I figured I had to be losing, so I took tickets again. This time, I was 1 4-train route away from completing it, and had 2 wilds in my hand, so I kept it for 10. But the wife again took tickets and kept 2 of them.
I just want to say I'm not trying to make fun of this guy. I think this post is pretty endearing, but the usage of the wife just absolutely obliterated me. So this next person, though, I am making fun of a little bit. The next complaint is that the cities in Germany are in German.
As a gateway game, it failed. These few changes, except for the bonus for most completed tickets, made the game much less accessible. The passengers was just one too many things to take on board, and were always played as an afterthought by new players. The map was also a problem for those who did not know any German or were not familiar with Germany, as some of the names were both unfamiliar and difficult for me to pronounce. This in itself could be interesting and educational over many plays, but pose just another barrier for beginners getting a feel for the game.
This is a complaint that I truly do not understand. I don't know what this person wants. There's no, like, English translation for Berlin. It's just called Berlin, no? Am I missing something? Because I'm pretty sure that's just how it works, right? Like, the names were unfamiliar. Like, yeah, that's the point. It's Ticket to Ride Germany. What were they supposed to do? Put Germany in New York? I don't fucking get it, dude. What did you want him to take the German landscape and put LA in it? I don't understand. It makes no sense. But last but not least was this one. This one's pretty damning. This last one is a review, and this review took off points because when they opened the box, the cards were not shuffled.
The train cars come ready to play and pre-sorted in separate bags, which was nice. The train car cards come grouped according to color, so you will need to do a good initial shuffling job as this should be random during play. The destination ticket cards come sorted in point value order, so you will need to do a good initial shuffling job as they should be random during play. The merchandise tokens and the most completed tokens bonus tile need to be punched out, but there aren't that many of them and they punch out easily and quickly. Otherwise, all components come ready to play.
What do you have to do to please people? I mean, come on. I'm worried that I'm gonna tell misinformation about the strategy of this game, and people are just out here complaining that the cards aren't shuffled. What are you doing? What the fuck? I had no idea that board game enthusiasts were so difficult to please, which does not bode well for me in the future. Alright, now that we have that out of the way, we can finally start wrapping up this video. Let's chugga chugga choo choo. Alright, let's go to the final cut. These games are going in the A tier, baby. These games are fun as hell and give you the opportunity to play aggressively in Ticket to Ride. Märklin and Germany feel a lot less lonely than America and Europe, since you can interact with the other players in ways that other than blocking. Cities essentially have value in this game, which I think adds an extra layer of depth. Control over a particular city isn't just about what route cards go into that city now, it's also about who can get there first with their trains or passengers depending on the version you are playing. In addition to choices made due to other players, players have more control over their own actions. For example, players have more control over their route card drawing in this game, allowing players to invest heavily into one strategy. Obviously, the games can't be S tier though because the city names are in German and not English. What's the actual reason these games aren't S tier? Honestly, on average, I still think the short route strat is a bit funky. It definitely requires you to be super on top of your meeple game, which is what I like about it, but it's not always the vibe for Ticket to Ride. Ticket is generally a more friendly game, and I've seen a ton of people go for short routes because they think it'll be a safer strategy. Since the demographic of Ticket players is pretty nice to each other, they usually won't steal each other's meeples or city points, but without that you are pretty screwed as a short route player. I guess what I mean is that it's a bit counterintuitive. Playing short routes, you are the person that has to make the game difficult for the long route player to play. It is in fact riskier, which I don't think bodes well for most of the people who play this game. That being said though, if you're like me and you like playing a little mean, this Ticket is definitely for you. So yeah, this game's gonna be put in the A tier, 6.5 out of 10 as a game, 8 out of 10 as a Ticket game. On the Ticket game scale, it's an 8 out of 10. Most requested video on my channel award gave Connor an Identity Crisis award. And that just about wraps it up. I wanted to thank you all so much for watching today's video, or maybe this month's video. My goal for this year is to get out a video a month, but like we'll see about that. I'm working pretty hard. I'm clocking in for this one, so I hope this does get out by February 15th. If it doesn't, hopefully it's close to that. Thank you so much for listening to my opinion on Ticket to Ride games. I really don't deserve it, but I really appreciate you guys watching. You know, I guess I'm just gonna have to keep going because, you know, I'm too far in now to turn back. I'm really doing this also just so I can make my hour-long absolute destruction hate piece on Rails and Sails. So until next time, have a happy and healthy month. Have a great time. I don't know, play some Ticket to Ride with people you love. It's really fun. Much better than playing online with strangers where you're just an absolute piece of shit. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope it's a banger, and I'll see you in the next one.